This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Hi, Riana Milne. Thank you so much for taking time for me today. How you doing?
Hi, Tyler. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show. I'm happy to be here and talk to parents about raising successful, emotionally happy kids.
And that's really the goal, isn't it? I've got 2 kids. I know you've got 2 plus 6 grandchildren, if you can believe that.
I do.
Anyone watching might not believe you. Listening, they can't see what I see. But yeah, so how would you describe your work? I mean, I can read off of a very impressive list of certified in clinical trauma and addiction, certified mindfulness coach. You've written books. You host a podcast. But like, how would you globally encompass yourself and describing your work?
Yeah, well, since I'm on a parenting show, I have worked with kids from age 4 to 5 all the way up to people who are 80 years old. I am a global life, love, trauma, recovery, and mindset coach. For this show, it's important they know that I was a SAC counselor, student assistance counselor in schools, where I sat on child study teams for grades, kindergarten, all the way through college. So it's kind of a mental health counselor in the schools. So I work with the emotionally upset kids. A lot of kids misidentified as ADHD because they're emotionally upset because they're going through some trauma at home or within the school. They're being bullied. And the facts are, when someone's under duress or stress, cortisol is up, memory is down. So, so many kids misidentified. So I handled the emotionally upset kids. And I also had a model talent school and agency, and I worked with ages 5 and up who wanted to be models and actors, and they did very, very well. And since that young age, for my own children and the kids that I worked with, whether it was in my therapy center, Therapy by the Sea, or in the Model and Talent School, I taught Mindset for Success, which is extremely important for parents to understand and know, and work with their kids from the very beginning, since my kids were babies, and my 2 daughters are very, very successful young women in very successful, happy marriages. And then I have the 6 grandkids who are 11 and under. And they, because my kids know mindset work, are growing up under mindset. Because childhood trauma goes through 3 generations, and it's up to us to understand what it is and then stop it. So even though my children had somewhat of a toxic father, and I left that marriage very early when they were young, all they need is one strong, emotionally healthy parent to teach them to be independent and emotionally healthy, strong individuals to go out into the world and be successful. My 2 daughters were out supporting themselves with great jobs from the age of 19 on. And I'm talking one in New York and one in LA. And that's when I lived in New Jersey. So you're teaching them real life skills from the very beginning.
Yeah,
So that's a little bit about what I do.
That's so interesting. That's really what we as parents are trying to do, is channel what you have turned into a profession. And how long ago did you say you started doing this work?
Well, I was a model and talent agent at age 26. So for 10 years I had that business and I sold it off. But I've been studying mindset work since my teens. And then, of course, raising my daughters, I was studying, I'm an avid learner. So I was studying the work from the Better Baby Institute, which was outside of Philadelphia where I lived, and using their materials from their school. And it was funny, they were working with children that, were mentally challenged. And I said, if it's working this well for those kids that, are suffering in that way, it was going to work wonderfully for my girls who are not mentally challenged. So my girls were reading by the age of 2. I remember they went into kindergarten. I said, what are you teaching the kids here? Well, we'll start with this is letter A and letter B. I'm like, honey, go over and pull a book off the teacher's bookshelf and read it to her. And she goes, oh my God, that's amazing. So they were talented and gifted all the way along. So a lot of parents think those ages 0 to 5 aren't important. They're the most important years for learning and skill growth that you can instill in your children. Early education, they were in Montessori since the age of 3. So, really teaching your kids, not only letting the schools do it, but you doing it and making learning fun and playing learning games all the way along. They can become very, very smart and love learning from an early age. So all these little skills are super important, but also teaching mindset and confidence and believing in them. For example, my daughter Alexi at age 5 saw the Save the Children commercial in Africa. She goes, "Mom, one day I'm going to go save those kids." I said, "That's a beautiful dream. I love that. I totally trust that you'll do that." Well, at age 15, she wanted to be a singer, a pop star, like a Britney Spears, that's who was all over, or Christina Aguilera, who was singing all over the pop charts. I said, well, let's make that happen. And she ended up singing on 3 multi-platinum CDs. Her tours went through Europe, ended in Africa. She looks down from the tour bus and she goes, "Now's the time." So she started a water well project. By the age of 21, she put her first water well in Tanzania, Africa, working with her best friend who had a connection to the UN. So they don't believe I can't do something. They believe I have a dream and I can do it. This is what mindset is. And then she was on television as a TV host, and now she's a top millionaire life coach, coaching people from around the world. So you can set your children up from early on to believe in themselves and their dreams and not say, "Oh, you don't want to do that. How are you going to get to Africa? That's going to cost too much money. You don't know anything about trying to help that population." No, there was never a negative message about her dream. This is mindset work. Okay.
Yeah, over the pandemic, I got really engaged with what the CDC was doing, and I realized that it was the CDC themselves that actually set the milestones for learning. You're supposed to read this many words by the time you're this age, and so on. And the standard is something I think so many people default to. So can you talk about breaking that standard and the role you played in the self-improvement and setting an example for the kids, and as a parent that
when I was pregnant, I was reading a lot of parenting books and how to give your kids the edge for success. So I've been doing that for years, and I do that for my clients that I have at my coaching practice now, which is Lessons in Life and Love Coaching, and I coach around the world globally, ages 16 plus. So just for example, I don't believe and when I'm in the schools and the teachers are forced to teach to a curriculum, I think it's ridiculous. I think the teachers have the education that they need to help kids learn in a fun and exciting way and not teach for the test. Kids are too stressed out for tests like that, these national tests. But I also think parents have to do their jobs at home too. And I know I was a stressed out, hardworking, I had 5 jobs, single mother. So I know what it takes to find the time to still read to your kids every night or teach them math games and make learning fun. But that's what's my priority. I didn't want them to end up in the town that they grew up in, Erie, Pennsylvania. It was like, no, I want you to be out there in the world. My other daughter has been approaching Congress with the Florida Freedom to Read. She runs that project, giving people the rights to read what they choose. So, to give them that level of confidence is a parent's job. It's not the teachers. The teachers are supposed to educate, and then the parents are supposed to back that up, right? So, but mindset is the parent's job. So that's how I feel about these standard curriculums. I think they're kind of ridiculous being in the schools. What a lot of people don't know is that childhood trauma impacts adults in life, love, and business. So how parents are raising their kids will stay with them lifelong. And the impacts of childhood trauma happen to 7 life areas. So your physical health, your emotional well-being, how well you do in relationships. So people that are constantly in and out of relationships or having toxic partners, that goes way back to the childhood trauma experience. The mental health, if there's an adult who's anxious or depressed or has low self-esteem, that goes back to childhood trauma experiences. Behavioral issue, poor self-regulation, aggression, or poor impulse control, again, childhood trauma. But there's two categories in particular that impacts children. One is under cognition, so impaired the ability to read, difficulty problem solving, language delays, problems with concentration, and poor academic achievement. This is all from childhood trauma. So what is going on inside your home? When I used to have my practice in New Jersey, in the Atlantic City area, people used to drop their kid off and say, fix my kid. I said, your child can wait in the waiting room. I want to talk to you. So what's going on inside of your home? Well, the father yells at me all the time. You know, there's always fighting arguments. I said, what does your child do? Just go to this room and he's quiet. I said, well, you are impacting childhood trauma right now. By that yelling and carrying on inside your household, your child is petrified. His cortisol is up. He goes to school. He probably didn't sleep well, thinking his parents are getting divorced. They go to school. They can't learn. Why? Because they're too nervous about what's going on at home. They can't focus. Okay, so I was doing meditation in my office. It was called Miss Riana's Relaxation Room. We did music therapy to actually the music of Louis Miguel, who I'm happy to see this weekend in concert. I'm so excited. I don't speak Spanish, but I love his music. But it did something with the brain that it calmed everything down. And with the meditation, the kids went back and they were happier, they were calmer, and their grades went up. So they felt better about themselves, right? And brain development. If a woman's going through trauma in her marriage, the baby can have smaller brain size, less effective processing, impaired stress response, and even changes in the gene expression has been proven in childhood trauma studies. So these two areas on that 7 life area chart are, you know, from science of the impact of childhood trauma.
I would expect that you would say 100% of kids on some degree or another have trauma of some kind, and a lot of parents are probably thinking, well, not my kid doesn't have any trauma. So
Of course.
what are some of the most common cases of trauma that you see?
Well, first of all, when I did my research and came out with a childhood trauma checklist that every parent can get on my website, it's rianamilne.com, my name.com. Just go under quizzes, it's the childhood trauma checklist, and you can check that for yourself and then what your kids are going through. And there were, when I was doing my deep research on this and how it impacts adults, I mean, obviously I knew how was it impacting kids, but not only was I the SAC counselor in the schools, but I worked in a mental health ward for kids that were suicidal, cutting, acting out, severely depressed, highly anxious, OCD, ADHD kids, ages 5 through 19. And then I worked in a drug and alcohol center for teens. So how did it escalate? So by the time they're teens, now there's a full-fledged addiction. Well, the childhood trauma was there early on. There's no doubt about that. Kids aren't born with it, right? So it's really important that, you know, you understand what the top 10 traumas are, and I'll go into what they are so parents can identify them. But number one, there are more. And number two, in the research in 2021, 100% of us have childhood trauma, not just children. Okay, so us adults too. And this is how it's coming out in job issues, relationship issues, and how you feel about yourself and your life as an adult. That's unhealed childhood trauma. Okay, so the top 10 traumas that kids are going through that impacts us. Number one, any addiction in the home. So there's drugs, alcohol, but there's also a sex issue, like if the child knows a parent's a cheater and they hear, you know, this conversation going on, the yelling and screaming about affairs, gambling, porn use, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching, social media addiction, or just being on the machines all the time. If the child's upset, you hand them a machine. Okay, these are the addictions that are going on in our households. Number two is verbal messaging. Do you tell your children you love them? Do you tell them you believe in them and their dreams? Do you compliment them when they do a good job? If they do a mistake, and they are supposed to, never say to your kid, you should know better. Because guess what? No, they shouldn't. They're there to learn lessons. They're little people with little immature brains. They're not supposed to know everything an adult knows. So the word discipline is from the Bible. It means to teach. Our job as parents is to teach the child to do better. I remember Alexia and I were doing a podcast show, and they're like, well, how was your mom? Do you remember, a couple of times she yelled at you? And she goes, I don't remember one time my mom yelled at me. She goes, I made mistakes. I remember I cheated on a test once, and I was petrified, and my father screamed at me. My mom sat down and said, babe, what's going on with you? You're so smart. You don't need to cheat. What's happening? And she got to the bottom of the issue where she had to take care of her baby brother before school because neither of her father or stepmother were doing it. So there was an at-home issue in the other house. But it was up to me to figure that out and then talk to the teacher in a calm and loving way. So what we were teaching is solve the problem, which we call life skills. So if they learn to solve the problem, like I said to her, well, what do you think we should do to solve this problem? Mom, I need to apologize to the teacher. I think that's excellent to write a note of apology. What else do you think we can do? Well, maybe I could ask her if I could retest. She knows I know the material. I don't know what got into me. I'm like, I think that's a great idea. You've been a good student all term. Let's see if she'll be willing to retest you. And third, well, if she doesn't, will you go in and talk to her? Absolutely, I'll be glad to do that. So now she solved her own problems, a second grader, and they are now learning to solve their problems because problems are part of life. So to ground them and send them to their room for 30 days or not see their friends is not teaching them the lessons they need to learn, right? So this is all explained in my book, Live Beyond Your Dreams, from fear and doubt to personal power, purpose, and success. She wrote a chapter in there, and she's also a best-selling author now as an adult, but she wrote it when she was 17. And also there's parenting chapters in there and one for teenagers. But let's keep going on to the list. So verbal messaging, what are you saying to your kids? If you say, you'll grow up to be no good, guess what? They will grow up to be no good. Okay, so what you say to your children is super important. And how you teach your children to think is super important. Number 3, any emotional abuse or neglect. Number 4 is any physical abuse, hitting, any kind of hitting. You're just teaching your kid to hit you back when they're older. Okay, rape or molestation, that could happen inside of the home or outside of the home, anywhere. And more little boys are abused than most people realize. So you have to be very cautious for your kids, okay? Number 5 is around abandonment. There's 2 types, fault and no fault abandonment. So a no fault abandonment is if a parent happens to die early, a kid will be traumatized no matter what happens. It's a big loss. Get them a trauma recovery coach right away, okay? Second is if a parent travels a lot for work, it's no fault because this is how they support the family. So that parent would have to be sure they carve out quality time with that child that they can look forward to when that parent returns. And another one is if a parent is deployed for war. I was in the elementary schools during Iraq and Afghanistan, and I can tell you a lot of kids were emotionally checked out. So many kids referred to child study team, ADHD. I said, that child's not ADHD. He has a mother over in Iraq, and she's worried if that mother's coming home to her. So, talking about that and relieving that pressure and getting the cortisol to lower and knowing they have loving support within the school, which is another thing. The SACs were first to go when there's budget crises, but they keep the football coaches. Now, what is the problem there? Okay, every school should have a student assistance counselor to help our kids from every age, early all the way through high school, to assimilate the trauma that comes to them in their life, especially in today's crazy world. Okay, so the fault abandonment would be never spending time with your child, never knowing your child, or even being in the household but ignoring your child. I used to have a lot of kids say, but Miss Rihanna, I don't want to go see my dad. He just sits there and watches football all weekend. I'm just in my room on my computer. I'm bored. That's an emotional abandonment. There's no connection. Okay, so get off the TV and spend some quality time with your kids. Okay, the next one is if they were adopted, part of foster care, or had to go live in someone else's home for a period of time. Even if that's grandma or the aunts, there still is a feeling of being pushed aside or having to leave the primary house. Number 7 is one most people can relate to, and that's personal trauma. So if you're ever bullied, made to feel different, of a different culture in a primarily white Caucasian school, coming out LGBTQ, okay, I work with all populations and the gay and lesbian population. Anyway, you just felt different, you didn't fit in. If you're identified as an ADHD student, you do feel different. You have to be pulled out for special classes. You feel different. Everyone's looking at me. They hate it. Okay, so understand that any way that they're labeled or feel different is impacting their self-esteem. Okay, and that's going to impact them as adults. Okay, trauma number 8 is sibling trauma. So perceiving the sibling to be the golden child, the favored one. So the more pretty or handsome child, the star athlete, where you were not that athletic, so you didn't feel as good in mom and dad's eyes, or if the sibling was born with a medical issue. Now, a child can understand my brother needs my mom and dad more, but it doesn't mean they don't feel left and pushed aside, right? So again, carving out date time with that other child would be important so that they feel they're getting special time too. Trauma 9 has 2 traumas. Trauma 11 had to be moved down. When I made this list, community trauma was not that big. Now, unfortunately, it's one of our biggest ones with COVID. All our kids were impacted by COVID worldwide. They will need mental health support and life coaching support. It's funny, though, a lot of kids hate going to counselors. They don't like to be sitting in that room. It's like everyone's looking at me. That's why my teens love working with a coach on the computer, and it's like, great, I can do this from my room or the living room and have my session and not go to some doctor's office, right? You know, that they feel more normalized about it, and they like the word life coach better than counselor, because counselor makes them feel something's wrong with me, and no kid wants to feel that way, right? So the sibling trauma can also be a child bullying them, the brother and sister bullying them as well. I forgot that one. Okay, so family trauma and community trauma is number 9, right? So community trauma is our COVID epidemic and what happened to our kids with schoolwork. It's also our Mother Nature events, floods, fires, hurricanes, and the impact on the family. It's the families that move every 2 to 4 years, like in the U.S., our military families. That makes the child the new kid in school all the time, making them, oh, I gotta make new friends again. It's very difficult on the children. When parents have lack messages saying like, we don't have the money for this, or stop asking for that, I can't even pay the gas bill. These are the adults who are entrepreneurs and won't spend the money to invest in themselves because they don't feel, you know, they have it, but they may have thousands in the bank, but they feel poor all the time. Okay, growing up in a dangerous neighborhood makes people feel unsafe. So what goes on in the community and within the family is very important. A parent or relative being incarcerated. So these are just some of the family traumas. Of course, our school shootings, huge family traumas and personal traumas for the children, right? Even if there's counseling in the school, I would advise you get your child a life coach if anything like that happened within their school. They will need some special time around safety and moving forward from an incident like that. And then trauma 10 is mental health issues in mom or dad. Typical ones are anxiety or depression, especially going through a divorce. That's very, very hard on the kids, especially with 2 volatile parents fighting all the time. That is the worst. But also, you know, bipolar and borderline personality are the most difficult for kids to navigate. So simply, borderline is erratic moods. When they're good, they're great. When they're bad, they're horrid. The child never knows who they're going to get. So they're walking in the doors like, am I going to be yelled at today? Is my mom going to be nice to me today? Is my dad going to be screaming at me? You know, that uncertainty. That's a person that grows up with a lot of anxiety, and then they pass that on to the next generation. Bipolar is manic depressive. A lot of people think manic's the high and happy stage. Well, it could be if the manic phase was a shopping spree, that the next month the bills come in, you don't have the money, and then the depression could hit for 3 months. And depression can show up as anger, checking out emotionally, or extreme fatigue. So those are the top 10 traumas that I name. And again, 100% of us have something. So it's important as adults we identify it so we excel and we're the happiest as adult human beings. Because when we are, then our children do the best and be the best that they can be when we are happy parents, right? And if you're trying to hold it together, whether you're a single mom or dad and your partner was toxic and you know your kids are in the middle of this toxic battle, then I work with parents on that as a divorce coach. And I also work with how you're to parent your kids during this time. So sometimes I meet with the kids during the sessions, and sometimes just to tell your child this, or have a heart-to-heart with them about this issue. And everything in the family dynamic then changes. So
I feel like you just hit like 4 or 5 just for me.
It's a lot.
And like I feel like a super well-adjusted person. I feel like a good parent. I feel like my kids don't have trauma, but you revealed to me so many things I lack self-awareness in. And I think the first thing I'm going to do after we're done recording is take one of your quizzes online, and I'm going to tell everybody to go check that out too. But
there's 4 of them. Yeah, 4 free quizzes that you should take all of them. Yes.
So something that's incredibly clear to me is you are an expert in this, and that you're passionate about it, and it comes from deep within you. Like you found your mission in life. Can you speak about when you found that mission and when you acknowledged that this is how I'm going to devote my life?
Sure. It happened when I had a childhood trauma. My very best childhood friend, Michael, was killed by a drunk driver when we were 16. And it was the first loss I ever experienced. I said, Mom, I'm really, really sad about Michael dying. Like, I think I need a counselor. And she goes, no one in this family will ever go to a counselor. Back then it was so shameful. And I never had any healing, so I turned to books. And that's when I started reading, the Dalai Lama, Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, business spiritual leaders. So that's what I'm saying. I started learning mindset work to try to help give myself a sense of calm, but also it became my purpose. And I said, I will grow up and become one, because kids like me need help. So it was always in my mind to help, and I was horribly bullied in middle school. That was very painful for me. I felt very different. I was a tall and skinny kid, so I was cut up for my shape from the boys and the girls. My brother was the golden child. He was the star water polo player and the swimmer, all-American, went to the Junior Olympics, so all the focus was on his great career, and I was the 4th out of 5 children, so I was after him, born between 2 boys. I was even told verbal messaging, I was really hoping you would be a boy because I didn't want 5 kids. I'll have to go back and try for my second son. So I was basically told I wasn't wanted by my mom. We never heard compliments. I did not hear I love you. My dad was FBI, CIA, so he traveled for work. We did not know it until we got letters from Ronald Reagan and William Casey from the FBI thanking him for his many years of service. So I remember saying, where's Daddy coming home? And he was the loving parent. And when he was home, he was very loving, but he wasn't home much, and I didn't have much of his time. So, when I did the research on the traumas, I thought, I don't really have any traumas. And I'm like, oh my God, well, I knew I was bullied. That one I knew, and my brother was the superstar. I knew that. So, just identifying them, I'm like, wow, okay, now I know why it impacts me, and psychologically why I was choosing the partners I was choosing. and then I could fix it. And my quote is, you can't change what you don't know or understand. Because that's where I was. And then it's like a rainbow, right? There's this huge learning curve, which was all my research in 2011, 12, and 13. And then by 2015, I started talking about childhood trauma. And it's funny, I had a triple master's in clinical psychology. I graduated with honors, and not once was that term used, childhood trauma. So in 2015, when I started talking on podcasts, people, some other therapist says, you're making that up. It's not in the DSM-4. I'm like, yes, but it should be, because that is the root of all the issues for our kids and our adults today. And if we had that knowledge of how to have the confidence to solve the problems, like I look at my kids, like they're very mild-mannered. They never lose their tempers. They're able to solve problems. They're very strong entrepreneurs. They start something from scratch and build a business with no business loans. Just creativity and ingenuity and the confidence they need to be successful. So if you start mindset work really early with your children, that's what I said. My kids will not grow up to be like their father. They're going to grow up to be very successful young women and make it on their own, and then have the power to choose wonderful husbands. And they have great husbands. I love my sons.
That's awesome.
That is the journey of healing childhood trauma in your lineage, right? When you know about it and you know what the traumas are and you get it in black and white. If you're driving and hearing this, I do have a free ebook on my website on the homepage as well. A free AI chatbot. I fed it thousands of information on me, my books, my website, my podcast. It's called Lessons in Life and Love with Coach Riana Milne. So my chat box can give you a couple answers too, and then it'll give you a way to reach out to me directly, or you do a discovery session. And when I work with kids, first I meet with the parent, and I said, from your point of view, what is going on? Because it's always different from the child's, and that's okay. But I want to know from your point of view what's going on. Then I meet with the child, and then they choose to hire me or not after that. And most people say, my kid will never work with you. And I'm like, yes, they will. Once they meet me, they know I'm cool, I'm down to earth. My daughter sang with celebrities. I used to be a talent agent, so if they have a talent, I get that too. I haven't had a kid that does not want to work with me. I even had in high school the Crips and the Bloods, kids from the gangs up in Hackensack High School that I could turn around and get them out of the gangs and get them focused on their career after high school. So our teens today are really, very anxious between 11th grade and what do I do after high school? What if my family doesn't have the money for college? What kind of work am I going to do? Am I just going to work at McDonald's? And, they don't know what they want to do. And so I do that job coaching. There's a beautiful story of my 18-year-old that I worked with, Amy, on my website. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the homepage, that story is there. And her mom, Linda, contacted me, and we worked together for 6 months, and her daughter really, really excelled. It's a beautiful story. Then I interviewed Amy later for a podcast because she wanted to share her story. Like, don't be afraid to have a life coach. It's the best thing I did. It changed her whole life. So, if you can give your kids that edge, and the number one thing parents also have to know, it's completely tax deductible because of all my licensing and certifications. So not only am I a licensed mental health counselor on what's called CCTP, Certified Clinical Trauma Professional Advanced. So I have the psychological degrees and accolades, and then also all the coaching, licensing, and certifications. So coaching is much better than counseling because it's educational. I'm teaching them real skills like how to do a resume, how to job interview. Like Amy was a host at a fast food restaurant, and she was dating the 30-year-old dishwasher. So I said to her mom, I would like her to quit that job, and we're going to figure out what she wants to do, and then we will get her hired in something that will be a good credit for her resume. And Linda's there, you can do whatever you want. I totally trust you, Rihanna. And she was a nurse, so she was from the medical field. And she quit that job because we did not want an 18-year-old pregnancy, right? So, and we had to get her focused on college and what she was going to do next. So we got down that she wanted to do interior design / architecture, flipping homes and redesigning them. And so I got, with her interview skills, no credentials of a job at all, we got her a job in a home design store. And by the time she went then to a university, she raised her grades, went to a large university for architectural design, and is now a manager of that huge home design company. So I'm sure she'll be moving up to corporate pretty soon, if not already. So again, you can give your kids these skills for success, and then you don't pay thousands afterwards homing them and feeding them, and because they never launched. There's a lot of kids still at home in their 20s, 30s, not launched yet. So this life transition coaching is imperative.
Yeah, particularly with this new generation coming up, there's a lot more boomerangs than there used to be. And I know we're getting close to backing into when we've got to stop, but I feel like we could talk for hours. And I know so much about what you do, but so little about you. And it sounds like there's so much interesting things to unpack. So I'd like to do like a quick little rapid fire before we gotta go, that hopefully will give a little bit of insights to you and the way you think. And maybe we end up doing another one where we can dive in deeper when we have more time.
That sounds great, Tyler.
So,
okay.
My first question will be, what are 2 or 3 characteristics that every parent should cultivate in their kids to prepare them to be in the world?
Number one mindset for success, hands down. To help you get started with that, get my book, Live Beyond Your Dreams. It is on Amazon and every online platform, book and Kindle. I mean, definitely mindset is number one. Number 2, cultivate their talent. If dad is a star football player and your son wants to be an artist, let him be an artist. He doesn't want to be the football player just because dad was. So really listen to your kids. What do they want? What will make them happy? What will make them feel at peace and feel that they excel in something that they want to do? So listen to your kids when they say, I'd like to try this or try that. Number 3, have them start working early. They need to learn to take direction from other adults. They need to know the value of money. They need to have jobs on their resume, which we call credits. They need to volunteer in school because those are credits as well, and get their letters of recommendation from their teachers and their volunteer sponsors, organizations, or teachers. Getting them out into the work world early, like dog sitting, dog walking, babysitting, things like that, where they're learning the value of money. In my parenting chapter, it talks about behavior modification, which I did in my schools. I had charts all over my walls. And yes, at first it's extrinsic rewards, meaning they get dollars or monies or rewards. In schools, I got to go into my treasure chest and pick an award. But when they feel the difference of how they feel inside, that's intrinsic awards, right? They feel better, they're more confident. So when you're doing behavior modification as a kid, it's called STAR chart. After they're 12, it's called the allowance chart. So they get an allowance for doing their chores around the house. You don't nag them. It's not like, do this or you're not going to get your allowance this week. They can see the chart. If they're choosing not to, then they don't get the money, but their brothers and sisters might. And it's like $5 for a little person, $10 if they're 12, 13 years old. But the idea of that, they say, Dad, can I have money to go to the movies? It's like, well, you earned your money. So they'll take $20 the movie. It's like, whoa, popcorn is $10 and a soda, that's $18. Or I can just get a candy and that's only $7, and I can save the rest. Now they're learning the value of money, and they're not so likely to blow it or want things, like the people that are craving all these status symbols and clothing. My daughters never got into that. They don't care what purse they have a purse, okay? Because I wasn't into that. So, they know the value of money. When they were out on their own, I'd ask, Hun, are you okay? Mom, I'm good. Because if they had one job and they needed a second, they would get the second job. So keep building your letters of recommendation, because you will need them to get into college. You will need them to get future jobs. How do you get them? Small jobs, being responsible, on time, and doing volunteer work, and getting a letter or certificate from those organizations, and being involved with clubs or groups at school. So those would be my top three.
Yeah,
That's a little
getting kids to
lengthy
work
answer,
early.
but I'm trying to teach as much as I can while I'm on the call.
Yeah. Okay, so let's suspend time, space, reality, money. If you could give a gift to every parent without regard to the limitations of the practical world we live in, what gift would you hope every parent to have?
The gift of knowledge, right? And the willingness to learn to how to be the best parent that they can be. Obviously, if they're on their podcast, they're doing that, which is yay, kudos to you guys. Do learn about mindset. If you know your child is struggling, do not wait. You know, parents that have waited, they ended up in the mental health ward at the hospital I worked at. So do not wait. The first sign of trouble, say, hey, let's talk to a life coach about that, and make it like it's a cool thing, like it's a status thing. That's how my people look at it, my teenagers. And if you think they need support from high school to college that first year, I'm on retainer for a whole year for those kids to meet with me. How's the grades? How's the social life? Did you meet a new friend? Are you going to rush a sorority? Let's talk about what that looks like, you know. So I am there to advise them. And just don't hesitate. Remember, it's a tax deduction, so why would you not invest in the mental health of your child to make sure they are the most successful they can be, especially in today's competitive world, right? So, you know, let them follow their dreams. Don't hold them back in any way. Like when my daughter said at 20 she's going to Africa, that's a pretty scary thought. I'm like, all right, you've got the UN, who's the sponsor, and I just need your daily schedule, where you'll be, and a phone number in case of an emergency. And I just said prayers and let her go. But that's what we have to do. We have to give them the confidence to let them go. That is their job, to fly. But when you've taught them life skills and mindset, money control, right? They know how to save money. They know the value of money. Then they can make it on their own. This is our job as parents, to teach them these things.
On your website and the title of your books and so many places, you see the word love. So when in your life do you feel the most love?
Oh, I feel it all the time, all day, every day. First, the love of God. I'm a very spiritual person. Second, love of family. Third, of course, love of self. I love who I am and what I do. I'm very proud of the work that I do. I've got an incredible fiance, beautiful ring. We're going on a 2-week incredible vacation next week. Love of friends. We call that agape love. Love of friends. Love from my clients. It's such a great feeling when you see your clients just like grow and shoot for the stars. And you know, like Amy said, Rihanna taught me to shoot for the moon. I never knew I could, and I did, and I won. I got there, and I'm going to keep doing that, right? So, you know, there's love everywhere you look, and it's up to you to create that feeling of love in every aspect of your life.
And my last question, Rihanna, and we'll make sure we've got your links in the show notes and everything when we publish. So everybody check that out. But my last question, you've got 2 kids, 6 grandkids, presumably they will have kids and grandkids and so on. And if they get to hear you talking to them 5 generations from now, what is a message you would share with every generation of Milnes?
Yeah, I love the Milnes. Even my nephews, my nieces, my nephews, they're all hardworking, very successful, very mindful, conscious people, all serving. Like my nieces and nephews are in the military serving, right? So we're a very loving, giving family. And I already see this in, you know, my older grandchildren. My my two oldest are 11 and 8, and they're already like being leaders in school. My oldest grandson, Logan, made a time capsule for his school, his idea. And he texts me, "Grandma, you'd be so proud of me. I gave a speech to the school board today, and I didn't even write anything down. They wanted to know about my time capsule." And I'm like, there you go. You're already giving your first speeches, And of course, I gush on that because that made him feel so good and so proud. So he knows who his grandmother is, and they will know who I am and the work that I do. And I remember writing them a letter about Dr. Martin Luther King. And I used to teach character ed in the schools, and I said, this was one of our favorite weeks, teaching the lessons of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'd walk into the classroom and it's like, yay, it's Miss Riana Day, And it's like I would teach them the lessons of Dr. King. And I said, and I would like you to know that from Grandma's point of view, about being a leader and love for all. And, you can do it in the smallest ways. Like, let's say example, like the child drops his tray in the lunchroom. Everyone will laugh at him and say, look, and I said, you be the leader and you stand up and say, don't worry, it happens to all of us. Let me help you. And then what are they going to say about Logan and Simon? Wow, he's such a nice kid. He helped, he stood up to someone else who was being bullied. And then I told them I had a program in the school. I ran the anti-bullying program called Stand Up for Friendship. And it was so popular, it was televised everywhere in South Jersey. And all the bullying in my school literally stopped. And it was an atmosphere of loving support. I'm like, why doesn't every school have a SAC counselor doing the anti-bullying work instead of saying, oh, we'll get rid of them, it's a budget cut? I'm like, what are they thinking? Our kids need our mental health work first, and they can do sports outside of the school if that's what has to happen. So, it's like they're setting them up for the wrong thing. Really, do you want them to be a jock after high school, or do you want them to be successful, confident, mindful, conscious human beings that can be successful in any field that they learn, right? So I'm very passionate about kids in the schools and their needs. And I know my grandkids are going to grow up to be leaders as well. I'm just totally confident on that, because their moms and dads are fantastic people.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate our conversation, Riana. It's clear to me how much you love the contribution that you make to humanity, and it's clear to me that you are making a big one, especially with kids. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I hope we stay tuned and maybe run it back again. And just thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tyler, for having me. I hope this helped. If any parent has any struggles, please reach out to me. Again, my website is rianamilne.com. My podcast, Lessons in Life and Love. And the one book that I go into mindset and parenting skills is Live Beyond Your Dreams, From Fear and Doubt to Personal Power, Purpose, and Success. And under the books section, you can get the first 60 pages for free on my website. So help yourself to that and all the other free resources that are on there.
Everybody check it out. We'll link it in the show notes too.
Thank you.